The governor of Indiana thanks Christian churches for all the content that they're making available during these times. And we at the Better Message have to ask the question, is the devil winning the day right now? Or is he losing it? Is he taking hits, even if he's getting a few punches in? Well, we at the Better Message say you cannot keep the Better Message down. Hello and welcome to the Better Message. I'm Pastor Dan Torkelson, the unanxious pastor of St. John's Lutheran Church in North Prairie, Wisconsin. And who says that the glass is half empty? My friends, listen. Um, my Facebook, everybody's Facebook network is different. That's the strange thing about social media. But my Facebook network is connected to a lot of my brother pastors in the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, and I have to say that I am just astounded right now at all the good things that are happening out there on the intrawebs. And I hope that I'm going to try to make some more of that available to members here at St. John's so that they don't have to spend their time listening to the ninnies on the mainstream news media try to ratchet up your anxiety with false and fake news. We're not going there. I'm just not allowing that. I want to put as much good stuff out there for the people that I serve, but also on my Facebook account for anyone who might be watching. There is just a ton of exciting stuff going on out there, and that's why the governor of Indiana did what he did. He thanked the Christian churches in Indiana for the work they were doing. Like I said before, this is not a time for us necessarily to work more, but we are finding different ways to work during this time in the church, and so much of it is just fantastic. And I can think of some other good things that are going on as well right now, but I want to take a little break before I dig deeper into that. And mention two people who, over the years, um, had an impact on me, and a positive one, and both of whom were called home recently. I want to begin with Marlis Taggy Moberg. Marlis worked for Bethesda Lutheran Home in Watertown, my hometown, for years, and I was an employee there as well. And for 2 summers, in the summers of 92 and 93, those have been the summers between my graduation from college and seminary, and then the summer between my first and second year of seminary. I was the coordinator of the Camp Mott's servant event for the Lutheran Church of Missouri Synod, where we brought in youth groups to camp out at Bethesda's Camp Mott's, with different groups of residents every week from Bethesda. These were people who had cognitive disabilities, and the vast majority of them at Bethesda were at I would say, the lowest levels. There are 4 categories of cognitive disability, the bottom 2 being severe and profound. And that's what most of these residents were. And I saw some really wonderful things during that time. And my administrative boss, the boss above my actual boss, was Marlis Taggy Moberg. And she was a tireless advocate for those with cognitive disabilities. She wrote a really wonderful book. I think she privately published it, but it was a really wonderful book called Why Are They So Happy?, in which she talks quite a bit about the gospel's impact on the cognitively disabled people with whom she worked, and how happy it made them. And it was really a marvelous book. And I think I knew Marlis just about all of my life, if I think about it enough. But I also had the opportunity to work under her and talk with her on many occasions, and she was just a real blessing to work with. She lived a good long life too, which is good. She was a real steadfast Christian servant, and her dedication to people with cognitive disabilities is just admirable. She's a great example of what I find it means to be pro-life. A lot of my pro-life understanding comes from working with the cognitively disabled, and how grateful I am that so many people, so many parents did not, abort. These people, I've learned so much stuff from the people, from cognitively disabled people, especially with regard to the gospel. And Marlis was so right. She expressed it so well in that book. And my sympathies go out to her family, and I just praise God for the work she did. in the kingdom. I also want to remember also Herb Mueller, the the first vice president emeritus of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Herb died after a battle with brain cancer. He was diagnosed with it shortly before our convention last summer in Tampa. Herb was a churchman's churchman, a humble guy, a loving guy, a caring guy. A good friend of mine, Bart Day, the CEO of Lutheran Church Extension Fund, posted a pretty touching uh, tribute to him because Bart worked in the International Center of the LCMS before he was with LCEF. And Herb was his go-to guy when he was frustrated, and Herb was always there, always listening, always patient. And Herb wrote me 2 personal letters, probably in the last 4 years, including one last year, and just so encouraging. I still have those letters. I'm going to keep them. I really will remember him fondly. And he was a wonderful servant of our church body, and just a churchman's churchman and a pastor's pastor. And he will be missed. And again, my sympathies go out to his family. And I'll be looking forward to, hopefully, if there's a memorial service, either attending or if that's streamed, attending online. But Herb was a wonderful man, and I thank God for him as well. Now, to get back to what I'm talking about before, you can't keep a good message down. You can't keep a better message down, and history reveals this, so I wanted to talk about it today on the better message. The Christian message, the gospel message, has always probably done better under adversity than under strength and wealth and all that sort of thing, which explains a bit why the Christian church in America struggles. Why back in the 1990s, an Ethiopian Christian church, I think it was out of the Anglican Communion, sent missionaries to the United States. They did that, and I remember kind of smirking at the time. I was a seminarian when it happened and when I heard about it. I remember kind of laughing about it at the time, but the reason I was laughing was because I saw the need. And I think most pastors do. We're working in a post-Christian American society. There's no doubt about it. And Americans are just not, I guess, struggling enough to recognize that they can't meet all their needs, and that the most important needs in life are still provided by a good and gracious God who causes the rain to fall on the just and on the unjust, as Jesus said, which is to say, even though they don't believe, there's God still providing for them anyway. Which says so much about why this message that we have is the better message. But if you take a look back in history, I mean, the earliest centuries of the Christian church are just proof of this, because even as the Roman government tried to persecute Christians, it only made the gospel spread. I always say the Christian church is kind of like the ultimate mole in whack-a-mole. You might try to hit them, good luck. You may not, you probably won't succeed. And especially when adversity shows up, the gospel has a chance to really shine and spread in marvelous ways. And quite interestingly, this is talked about a bit in the scriptures too. I just did my Zoom Bible study, which I just started. It's going to be a daily Bible study on Paul's prison epistles. And I chose the prison epistles, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, because it kind of feels like we're all in prison right now. But I chose to start with Philippians, which is also known as the Epistle of Joy, and it's a remarkable book because Paul he's in his house arrest in Rome, probably when this is written. Some argue differently, but I'm gonna stick with that. He thinks he's coming up on the end of his life. He doesn't think this is going to end with him being released, and in Philippians, still, he writes with such an amazing joy, even though he knows he's probably in the last period of his life, and that he's likely going to be dead by capital punishment one way or another. As he talks about his situation, he says this. It's really remarkable. This is Philippians 1, beginning of verse 12. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Now that's pretty cool. And what that basically says is that so many Christian brothers who probably heard the word through Paul, the human instrument. And remember, it's not our decision that saves us. Faith isn't a decision. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. They heard the gospel from Paul, and now Paul was in prison, and they were getting bolder, and they were spreading it. And it's an early foreshadowing of what would happen during the persecutions, which would happen later. Well, actually, the first persecution is going on. It's why Paul is in prison. That was under Emperor Nero. And again, it was kind of a house arrest I think, for most of it. But Paul is basically saying because he couldn't do it, the brothers were becoming more bold and they were spreading it. And thus this thing was growing like a weed, or maybe you might say spreading like a virus, but it was the better message. It was the good news, and people were bold enough to do it. Now, interestingly, Paul adds to this argument, and I want to have a little fun with that too. So continuing on in verse 15, he says, some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of rivalry, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. What then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. And that underscores a really important point about the better message. It's a point that sometimes we Christians try to deny, but it is so very, very true, and that is that God works in all things for the good of those who love him. He's actively working in all things, even things we think are bad. That was our mistake at 9/11. Christianity was a lot of Christianity. I mean, I think a lot of us Lutherans were trying to hang faithful here, and we were kind of in a strong minority. But a lot of the majority of Christianity was trying to protect God from accusations and all of this. And I got news for you. God's a big boy. He doesn't need your protection, and you couldn't provide it if you tried. We need to learn to ask different questions. Why is not a good question. Oh, and if you're like an atheist at like a 9/11, you say, well, where's your God? Well, I'm going to say he's right in the middle of all of it. And we need to, I think the question we need to ask, I've heard others say this, so I'm stealing from somebody, I'm sure. Toward what end? Toward what goal, final goal, God did this happen? What are you actively working toward accomplishing through this? So when I go back to my catalog before of all the wonderful things that are happening online that are coming out of Christian churches, I'm going to argue that if even if it's by force, that families are together and have to be together, that's a good thing. I mean, it hurts our preschool, it hurts our daycare, which is closing today after an admirable, just an admirable effort to hang in there for the sake of our community. I really am proud of our staff at St. John's over on that side of the operation. They never lost sight of the mission, and they were nonplussed by everything that was going on. God bless them for it. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Karen. Proud pastor moment, you know. But at the end of the day, if we had to close, we're closing for about the best reason we could, and that is that families are home and together. And yeah, they're maybe struggling getting used to that idea, but you know what? Inside that struggle, good things should happen as well. I know that abuse cases are up as well right now, and that's not good, but I mean, that's why I and so many are producing more content. We want to get good things into your ears, turn off the TV. Yeah, you got to sit and listen to me preach, but better the word of God than fake news or anything else. This is a time for us to be doing the right things, and that message gets out. And if I go back to the mistake we made, at 9/11, we Christians made it, was we tried to protect God and suggested God had nothing to do with what happened at 9/11. That was a bad decision. And we should not make that mistake again. You can't keep the better message down, and I want God in that equation. I don't want people, when we ask the question, toward what end, God, when we ask a faithful question like that, I don't want people rushing to answer that. That could be that could be really arrogant on our part. I'm not ready to answer that question. I see good things happening, but I don't see the bigger picture any better than anyone else does. But I will say this, I will keep asking that question. And that, along with staying in the Word and along with time, I think are going to help us start to put answers to that question over time. And so I'm praying. I'm holding out hope that a lot of good happens here as a result of this. That we as Americans get back to reality, get back to keeping it real. If I go back to 2 episodes ago, we understand that there's a whole lot more to life than lattes and being a busybody and running the kids to schedules back and forth and that sort of thing. And that we as a nation might indeed improve as a result of it. That is my prayer, and that's why I'm putting the better message out. And I don't know if you're watching it or not, but if you see this video and that sort of thing encourages you, share it, put it out there, let others see what you're hearing, because I don't need the attention. I don't necessarily do this for that. But what Paul was underlining in that text before was that even if some people were sharing the word for selfish reasons, God can still work in that. He can work in the bad. He can work with bad motivations, like he did with Jacob in Genesis, and so many other stories in the Bible as well. Jonah. There are just phenomenal stories in the Bible where God is hard at work through idiots, and maybe I'm one, and I am one of those as well. But I'm not doing this for selfish reasons, but I've done plenty over the years for selfish reasons, and so I know I guess I kind of sympathize with it all. My whole point today is really pretty simple, and that is that you can't keep the better message down. Go ahead, try if you like. I don't think the government, especially here in the state of Wisconsin, is guilty of that. I think I was pretty happy with yesterday's ruling from Governor Evers, and I pray that he continues to get wisdom, as our president does too, and certainly everyone in D.C. I think D.C., especially at the Congress level, we saw some pretty ugly fails. I think it's important to think about all of us right now and not put selfish or political things above the common good and what we need. That should always be the case, but when you do it at this time, it's ugly, and you just shouldn't do it. But for us in the church, we have access to that better message, and if we stick to it, I'm sure the Lord's going to bless. He's opened an interesting door for the church right now, and hopefully you're benefiting from that. And if you know someone else who would benefit from that, either hearing it from me or some other, good, faithful, biblical source that you're tuned into right now, share it, put it out there, make sure people are hearing it. And that is, my friends, the better message for the day. Christ's peace and joy be with you. The peace and joy that comes only from the gospel, the forgiveness of sins purchased and won for you by Christ on the cross. That, my friends, is the better message. Amen. Have a great day.